Amakudi, 29, had poured her heart and soul into Orion Media for the past 3 years. She knew the ins and outs of every campaign, stayed late to perfect presentations, and was always the calm voice her team relied on when deadlines loomed. Her boss, Kwame Bodu, often praised her in meetings, calling her the backbone of the department, and everyone quietly assumed the next promotion, marketing manager, would naturally go to her. Amma had been dreaming about it, planning how she would lead the team, how she would bring fresh ideas, and how she'd finally get the recognition she deserved. So when the quarterly company party rolled around, she expected smiles, handshakes, and congratulations. Instead, she got shock. Kwame took the stage, a glass in hand, and announced with a grin that Zuri Mbeel, his stunning girlfriend who had joined the company only 6 months ago, would be the new marketing manager. The room froze. Conversations died mid-sentence. People exchanged awkward glances. Amma forced a polite smile and clapped, but inside, everything shattered. Every late night, every extra mile, every project she had carried, it all felt invisible. That night, Amma stepped onto her small balcony, the hum of Legos stretching beneath her, city lights sparkling like distant stars. She hugged her knees, staring out over the skyline, replaying every moment she had been loyal, every time she had trusted the system, every time she believed hard work alone would be enough. The betrayal burned deep, but as she breathed in the night air, a small, quiet resolve began to take shape. She might have been passed over tonight, but she wasn't finished. Not yet. The week after the party, the office felt different. Whispers floated through the air like a low hum that everyone pretended not to hear. It was obvious to everyone that Zuri's promotion wasn't earned, but no one dared say it out loud. People glanced at Amma with pity in their eyes, and some avoided her completely, not wanting to get caught in the storm. Amma, though, kept her head down and continued working. She smiled politely, responded to emails on time, and kept her projects on track. Inside, though, she felt a mix of anger, disappointment, and determination. Zuri, on the other hand, seemed to bask in her new role. She strutted around the office like she owned the place, often taking Amma's clients for meetings and presenting Amma's ideas as if they were her own. It was humiliating, but Amma didn't confront her directly. She knew something bigger was happening and decided to observe carefully before reacting. One afternoon, while Amma was quietly reviewing campaign data, her colleague Chitty came by with a hesitant look. "Amma," he whispered, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "HR has been keeping an eye on Kwame for months. There have been rumors about some unusual financial stuff and favoritism, but no one had proof until now." That little hint set Amma's mind racing. She started noticing things she'd ignored before. Budget numbers that didn't add up, expense reports that clearly favored Zuri, and confidential documents missing from her shared drive. There were files she had uploaded days ago, only to find they'd been moved or altered. The betrayal wasn't just personal anymore. It was professional, and it was bigger than a stolen promotion. Amma began to realize that Kwame's favoritism wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern, one that had allowed him and Zuri to manipulate the company from the inside. The quiet smile she'd worn during the announcement party was gone. Now, her mind was sharp, focused, and hungry for answers. She knew she needed to gather the pieces of this puzzle carefully. If she acted too early, she might ruin her chances of proving the truth. Every day, as she walked past Zuri flaunting her title, Amma held herself steady. She refused to let the betrayal break her spirit. Instead, it fueled her determination. She wasn't just going to watch silently while someone else claimed what she had earned. She was going to uncover the full story and make sure justice was done. Something told her that once she had the evidence, the whispers would turn into a storm, and Amma was ready to ride it. That evening, Amma stayed late at the office, pretending she had a pile of reports to finish. The rest of the building emptied out hours ago, the hum of the air conditioning the only sound accompanying. She sat at her desk, pretending to type, but her mind was elsewhere. After the past week, it had become clear that Zuri's promotion was just the tip of the iceberg. Something bigger was going on, and Amma knew she needed proof. Carefully, she opened the company server, pretending to review her usual folders. But then she noticed something unusual: hidden directories labeled with random project codes. Her curiosity piqued. She clicked through them. Inside were emails, financial transfers, and internal messages that didn't make sense at first glance. As she read, her stomach tightened. The files revealed a secret pattern of manipulation. Kwame and Zuri had been rerouting funds meant for client campaigns into personal accounts and unauthorized projects. Her heart raced as she scrolled through the digital trail. Every transaction, every altered report, every manipulated budget. Then she found one email that made her blood run cold. Kwame and Zuri were mocking her dedication. "The loyal donkey," one message read, laughing at the hours she had poured into her work. Her hands trembled as she realized just how deep the betrayal went. It wasn't just favoritism or a stolen promotion. They had been using the company and everyone in it for their own gain. Amma knew she couldn't take screenshots or leave traces behind. She grabbed a secure flash drive from her bag and carefully copied every single file, double-checking that nothing was missed. Each folder felt heavier in her hands, carrying months of deceit and lies. She saved the last file, took a deep breath, and quietly slipped the drive into her bag. As she stood to leave, she saw a familiar pair outside the elevator, Kwame and Zuri, laughing and joking as if nothing was wrong, completely unaware that the evidence of their corruption was now in Amma's possession. A small, quiet smile tugged at her lips. Tonight, she thought, things had finally shifted. The playing field wasn't equal yet, but it was starting to tilt. And Amma knew she held the first card. Walking out of the office, she felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. She had taken the first step, and the path ahead was dangerous, but for the first time in days, she felt in control. The silent betrayal had been recorded, stored, and now belonged to her, the beginning of a reckoning that no one in that office would see coming. The next morning, Amma walked into the office with the usual calm she always carried, but she could feel the tension in the air. Zuri was already there, leaning casually against the conference room table, her designer bag slung over her shoulder. The weekly team meeting began, and Amma presented her latest marketing strategy, one she had worked on for weeks. She spoke clearly, showing charts, insights, and projections. But before she could finish, Zuri interrupted. "That's interesting," Zuri said, her voice dripping with condescension. "But I think you're getting a bit too emotional about this, Amma. Maybe you should step back and let someone with a clearer head handle it." The words landed like a punch. The room went quiet. Colleagues shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some casting apologetic glances at Amma. She forced a smile, nodded, and said nothing. But inside, a fire burned. She clenched her fists under the table, her mind racing. This wasn't just arrogance. It was deliberate humiliation, and she refused to let it break her. That evening, Amma met her cousin Nia at a quiet cafe. Nia, a sharp and experienced legal assistant, immediately noticed Amma's tense demeanor. Over steaming cups of coffee, Amma recounted the meeting and everything that had happened over the past week. Zuri's promotion, the stolen clients, the suspicious activity she had begun to notice. Nia listened carefully, her brow furrowed. "Amma," Nia said finally, leaning across the table, "you have to document everything. Every email, every interaction, every time someone takes credit for your work. Power isn't about shouting or getting angry. It's about having proof when they least expect it. That's how you protect yourself and make sure justice is done." Amma nodded slowly, letting the words sink in. She realized that all the anger she had felt wasn't enough. She needed strategy, patience, and evidence. This was bigger than a promotion or a personal slight. It was about fairness, integrity, and exposing the corruption she had uncovered. As she walked home that night, the Lagos skyline glowing in the distance, Amma felt something shift inside her. She wasn't powerless. She wasn't the victim anymore. She had the knowledge, the drive, and the proof she needed. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. And for the first time since Zuri had been promoted, Amma felt calm, focused, and ready to take the next step. The fire inside her wasn't just anger. It was determination, and nothing in that office would stop it. Over the next few days, Amma poured every ounce of her energy into organizing the evidence she had gathered. Late nights at her apartment became her new routine. She opened the files she had copied from the office server, reading every email, every financial transfer, and every manipulated report with meticulous care. Piece by piece, she began building a story, not one of anger, but one of facts, clarity, and undeniable proof. She titled it simply yet powerfully, "Irregularities in Orion Media's Financial Operations." Amma included every important detail, timestamps showing when funds had been rerouted, client references proving whose work had been stolen, and email logs that revealed Kwame and Zuri's deliberate manipulation. She even added notes highlighting patterns she had discovered: favoritism, falsified budgets, and deleted documents. Every page was precise, professional, and impossible to ignore. She printed a clean, sealed copy for HR, and, not leaving anything to chance, uploaded a full backup to a secure cloud account she controlled. Nothing would be lost. Nothing could be tampered with. As she looked at the finished report, Amma whispered to herself, a quiet mantra she had repeated in her head over the last few days. "They taught me loyalty means silence, but silence only feeds corruption." Monday morning arrived, bright and humid, the streets of Lagos buzzing below. Amma stepped into the Orion Media building with a calm she didn't always feel. She wore a crisp white suit, perfectly tailored, her hair neatly done, and her steps deliberate. There was no hesitation in her stride, no flicker of doubt in her eyes. She carried the sealed folder like a weapon and a shield at the same time. Inside the HR director's office, she placed the folder gently on the table and looked up. The director raised an eyebrow, sensing the seriousness in Amma's demeanor. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't plead. She simply spoke with quiet confidence, explaining the document and what it contained if asked. Every detail she had meticulously recorded was now in the hands of someone who could act. As she left the office, the city lights of Lagos reflecting off the glass windows, Amma felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. The hardest part was over, gathering the evidence, staying patient, and resisting the urge to confront Kwame and Zuri directly. Now, the truth was ready to speak for itself, and Amma was finally ready to watch justice unfold. She wasn't acting out of revenge. She was acting out of power, integrity, and a deep need to reclaim what had been stolen from her. Within hours of receiving Amma's report, HR sprang into action. What had been quiet whispers around the office escalated into full-blown chaos. Emails were suddenly recalled, confidential files were locked, and employees began noticing that systems were being monitored more closely. The tension was palpable, a heavy weight that hung over every desk and meeting room. Kwame, usually so composed and confident, started showing cracks. His emails grew cautious, his usual swagger replaced with nervous glances and jittery movement. Everyone noticed the change, but no one dared ask him directly what was happening. Zuri, too, was affected. She had walked into her promotion with pride, flaunting her new title, but now that confidence faltered. When HR quietly summoned her for questioning, she left her office with a pale face, her heels clicking nervously against the polished floor. Rumors swirled, and the team exchanged looks of disbelief. Finally, it became clear that Amma's report was no ordinary complaint. It was an irrefutable trail of evidence that exposed months of corruption and favoritism. Amid all this, HR reached out to Amma discreetly. "Your evidence was instrumental," the HR director said, voice low but firm. "It was brave, detailed, and absolutely necessary. You did the right thing." Amma felt a wave of relief mixed with quiet satisfaction. The weeks of careful planning, the sleepless nights, the fear, it had all led to this moment. She hadn't acted out of revenge. She had acted for justice, and it was working. By Friday afternoon, the stakes grew even higher. The CEO of Orion Media flew in from the UK branch, his presence adding a new layer of gravity to the situation. Employees watched from their desks as Kwame was called into a midweek meeting, only to be escorted out of the building shortly after, his face pale, hands shaking, and phone confiscated. The sight left a hush across the office. No one had ever seen Kwame like this before. 2 hours later, Zuri followed suit. Her badge was disabled, preventing her from entering the building, and she disappeared into the city, leaving behind the position she had so brazenly flaunted. The office that had once felt suffocating and hostile to Amma now hummed with a different energy, a mixture of relief, shock, and awe. Amma returned to her desk quietly, taking in the scene. She didn't celebrate out loud. She didn't gloat. Instead, she felt a quiet satisfaction, a deep sense that truth and patience had finally prevailed. The storm of betrayal had passed, and the first signs of justice were shining through, brighter than any promotion or title could ever have promised. Amma sat at her desk, letting her eyes wander across the office she had once felt trapped in. The atmosphere had changed completely. The leadership team was being reorganized, emails flew back and forth, and meetings buzzed with a new energy, a mix of tension and excitement. HR had just sent out a company-wide email announcing her interim appointment as acting marketing manager. She read it quietly at first. Some colleagues clapped politely, while others just stared, disbelief written across their faces. It was surreal. After everything she had endured, the humiliation, the stolen promotion, the weeks of quiet investigation, she was finally being recognized for her merit. Her phone buzzed shortly after, and she saw a text from Kwame. "You won't last long. You don't have my power." Amma didn't hesitate. She deleted it instantly, feeling a small thrill of liberation. His threats, once so intimidating, no longer held any weight. She realized that true power wasn't something someone handed to you. It was something you claimed, often in silence, and sometimes through careful patience. That evening, she decided to leave the city behind, at least for a little while. She drove with Nia and Chitty to the beach, the Lagos skyline glittering in the distance as the sun dipped below the horizon. The breeze carried the salty tang of the ocean, washing away the tension of the week. Sitting in the sand, watching the waves crash and listening to her friends' laughter, Amma felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in months. "Power isn't something they give," she said, her voice calm but firm. "It's something you take back when they steal your voice." Nia nodded, smiling, and Chitty gave a quiet thumbs up. For the first time, Amma felt truly free. She hadn't just survived the betrayal, she had transformed it into strength. She looked out at the horizon, the city lights reflecting on the water, and realized this was only the beginning. Not just for her career, but for herself. She wasn't just reclaiming a title, She was reclaiming her life, her dignity, and her voice. And nothing, not Kwame, not Zuri, not anyone, could take that away. Weeks passed, and the office slowly began to breathe again. Amma rolled up her sleeves and got to work, determined to rebuild not just the leadership team, but the trust and morale that had been broken. She started by looking closely at her colleagues, identifying the people who had worked quietly and diligently, often without recognition. Those hard-working employees were promoted, given the opportunities they deserved, and their voices were finally heard. Amma also introduced clear, fair policies. Expense reports had to be transparent, project responsibilities clearly defined, and no one could take credit for another's work. She held regular check-ins with her team, not as a boss who demanded respect, but as a leader who inspired it. Slowly, the culture of favoritism and fear began to fade, replaced with collaboration, accountability, and mutual respect. Clients, who had grown wary during the months of mismanagement, began returning. They noticed the change immediately. Meetings were organized, budgets were accurate, and deliverables were on time. Many even complimented Amma personally, appreciating the transparency and integrity she had brought to every aspect of the company. Each positive interaction reinforced her belief that honesty and patience could outlast deception and arrogance. Then came the day of the board meeting. Amma walked into the room with a quiet confidence, documents in order, team reports prepared, and the air buzzing with anticipation. The CEO, visiting from the UK branch, addressed the board before turning to Amma. "Integrity doesn't whisper," he said, his voice firm. "It rewrites the rules." The room went silent as all eyes turned to her. Amma felt a mix of pride and calm, not the kind that comes from boasting, but the deep, steady peace of knowing she had done the right thing. HR officially offered her the permanent managerial role, this time publicly, on merit, and without question. She accepted, nodding with grace, understanding that this title was more than recognition. It was a symbol of the strength, courage, and perseverance that had carried her through the storm. As she looked around the office, she realized she was no longer the quiet, loyal employee who had silently endured humiliation. She was the woman who had stood up when everyone else looked away, who had turned betrayal into action, and who had changed the rules simply by doing what was right. Amma had reclaimed not just a position, but her voice, her power, and her place in a company that now reflected the values she had fought to restore. Months had passed since the storm at Orion Media had settled. Amma was focused on rebuilding her team, restoring trust, and leading with integrity, but one afternoon, her phone buzzed with a message that made her pause. It was from Zuri. She wanted to meet. Amma hesitated for a moment, curiosity warring with caution, but eventually agreed. She wanted to understand, not confront. They met at a quiet cafe in Lagos, away from the prying eyes of the office. Zuri looked different. The confident, polished figure who had flaunted her promotion was gone. In her place was someone worn down, tense, and nervous. She avoided eye contact at first, fiddling with her hands before finally speaking. "Amma, I've lost everything," she admitted softly. "My job, Kwame, my reputation, everything I thought I had." Amma stayed silent, listening carefully as Zuri continued. She tried to apologize, her voice trembling slightly, but she also tried to justify her actions. "I only did what the system rewarded," she said, her words defensive but tinged with regret. "I thought I had to play the game to win." Amma took a deep breath and replied, her voice calm but firm. "And I only did what the truth demanded." She didn't yell, didn't attack, and didn't gloat. There was no triumph in her tone, only a quiet, unwavering acknowledgement of justice and integrity. Zuri looked at her, her eyes a mixture of shame and confusion, unable to respond. For a long moment, they just sat there. The noise of the city outside felt distant, irrelevant. In that silence, Amma realized something important. Closure didn't come from revenge, and power didn't need to humiliate anyone. It came from standing firm, doing the right thing, and letting the truth speak for itself. Without another word, Amma stood up, collected her things, and walked away. Each step felt lighter than the last, free from the weight of anger or resentment. Zuri remained seated, staring after her, lost in thought, understanding finally that the game she had tried to play had ended long before Amma had even arrived at the table. As Amma stepped out into the Lagos sunlight, she felt a quiet satisfaction. This meeting wasn't about punishment. It was about balance, integrity, and moving forward. She had reclaimed her voice, her power, and her peace. And in that moment, she knew she could leave the past behind entirely, walking into the future with confidence and clarity. A year had passed since Amma's quiet battle at Orion Media had turned into a victory not just for her, but for every person who had been overlooked or silenced. Now, she stood on a brightly lit stage at a Women in Leadership conference in Accra, the audience buzzing with anticipation. Hundreds of women, some nervous, some confident, all eager to hear her story, watched as Amma took a deep breath and began to speak. She didn't name names. She didn't point fingers. Instead, she shared the journey, the struggles, the betrayal, the patience it took to gather proof, and the courage to stand for truth. She spoke about integrity, about refusing to stay silent when wrongs were happening, and about how justice could be achieved without malice or revenge. Her words were simple, honest, and deeply relatable. She spoke of resilience, of learning to trust her own instincts, and of the quiet power that comes from knowing your worth. When she reached the end of her talk, she paused, letting the silence hang for a moment before delivering her final, powerful line. When they see you as replaceable, remind them truth isn't. I didn't ruin his career. He handed it to me in a file. The audience erupted in applause. Some stood, some clapped, some wiped away tears. Amma smiled, feeling the weight of the past year lift from her shoulders. As she stepped off the stage, her phone buzzed. Messages flooded in from young women across Africa, words of gratitude, encouragement, and inspiration. They thanked her for showing them that courage, integrity, and patience could change lives. Looking at the screen, Amma realized that her story had become bigger than her own fight. It was a spark, a ripple spreading across the continent. She smiled softly as the screen of her phone faded from view, the words lingering in her mind. Courage is contagious. And in that moment, she knew it truly was.